Good morning, everybody. Whoa. It's always annoying to hear oneself through the amplification, but the age is such. Now, again, good belated morning to you. The panel that we have today is an extremely interesting panel. We have, as you can see, divergent age groups, of which I find myself in the middle. We have also, as you can see, quite diverse geographical representation. We have Max Kugler from Denmark. Welcome you.
Thank you.
A student of innovative entrepreneurship, design,
yeah.
and
social studies.
Social studies. We have Alex, that you have heard, from Hong Kong, a student activist, and there is a whole Wikipedia page devoted to him. So I'm not going to read that today, but I'm honored and proud to have you with us, and fingers crossed for your fight. We have Alexander Schwarzenberg, no need to introduce, former Minister of Finance, Chancellor for Václav Havel, and the presidential candidate. And we have Filip Jelínek, I think the youngest, but the founder of the high school, how would you call it exactly? Student Union?
Yeah.
Good, I remembered, which is quite a surprise. Now, let's start with Alex. Brief introductory remarks, then we'll take all of your opinions. Then I will turn the question time or debate time to you. Also, quite interestingly, you are now being broadcasted. So this is sort of hello mother moment. Providing, of course, your mother is on one of the 9 high schools in 3 different countries where we are having online streaming because of the internet. This is nowadays possible. We have a connection to a school in Denmark. We have a connection to a school in Slovakia. And there are other Czech schools hooked up to us. And they will ask questions through Facebook. Alex, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Now, of course, I forgot the topic.
Yeah, okay.
The topic is, do they hear us?
Yep, okay, thank you. So I'm Alex Chow, so I'm from Hong Kong. So the topic is, do you hear us? The role of young citizens in today's society. So, well, there are a couple of questions that have been delivered to us, so that would like us to answer. I'll try to make some attempt to them.
Je to hrozně přehlučený, já skoro nerozumím. Nemůžete to stlumit spíš? Could you try to speak louder and we will not rely on the amplification? It's
okay, yeah? testing. Yeah, practice a good praise. It's good? Good? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so when there's a question, what's the role of young citizens in today's society? So maybe people here will expect to listen to some story from Hong Kong, because it seems that umbrella movement would be one of the memory that come up in your mind when we talked about Hong Kong or discuss Hong Kong. So umbrella movement, well, it happened last year, and as maybe we could recall that thousands of millions of people, including teenagers, students, youngsters, and people from different generations, they all came to the street and make the protest. They occupy for the street for more than 3 months, nearly 3 months, and they blocked 3 main streets, 3 main major commercial areas in Hong Kong. And it's kind of an insult to the government. It's also a kind of attempt of struggle for democracy or democratic change in Hong Kong. But in this event or in umbrella movement, we could take youngsters as a catalyst or for runner. But the point is that nothing comes from nothing. So there's story, there's continuity, there's also things that laid down by the people who have been fighting for different things in the past few decades. So in Hong Kong, the story is like this. Well, before 1997, Hong Kong is a colony of Britain. After 1997, it's the so-called return of sovereignty of Hong Kong from Britain to China. So it's like in 19th century, Hong Kong was, well, half of the Hong Kong was sent to UK, and half the Hong Kong, it was borrowed to UK for 99 years, and that was up till 1997. So in Second World War, Hong Kong was once occupied by Japan. But after Second World War, well, UK took back Hong Kong, and by the time the Chinese government, say, well, the Communist Party, they didn't intend to, well, take Hong Kong back to their hand. The intention of doing that is that they would like to, well, utilize Hong Kong as much as possible. That's their tactics. So starting from 60s and 70s, well, people, youngest in Hong Kong, start to initiate, engage in different social movements. 70s and 80s were once the peak of social movement in Hong Kong. That was a time Communist Party, they were also had a hand in Hong Kong, and Taiwanese government, they will also play a role in Hong Kong. So there are quite a lot of dynamics happen in Hong Kong. So starting from 70s, 80s, well, at the same time, the UK government and the Chinese government, they also noticed that, well, 1997 is coming. So they have to negotiate, well, what's the future of Hong Kong? So what would be happen? What would the system be operating in Hong Kong? Is it a communist system, well, operate in China that would be copied to Hong Kong, or would Hong Kong adopt a so-called capitalist system? What would that be? So they start negotiating since late 70s. So there are lots of dynamics. Again, UK would like to turn Hong Kong into a more advanced city, so they could have more bargaining chip with Beijing. Beijing would also, well, have their, well, political agenda on Hong Kong. So in 80s, well, it's like there's a declaration that's called Sino-Joint British Declaration signed it. So it's like after 1997, although Hong Kong would return, so-called return to China, but Hong Kong will be taking a system that's called one country, two system. So Hong Kong will adopt a slightly different system from China. And this is, well, but how the story starts, well, and it continues to what we are facing today, the umbrella movement. So starting from the 80s, lots of youngsters, they would like to pursue the dream of democracy. And democracy is in a very narrow sense. That's democratic change in the political system. So we have to vote to elect or vote for our mayor, and mayor in the term, the term of mayor in Hong Kong is chief executive. So we would like to, well, choose our chief executive, to vote for our chief executive, and also for the parliamentary in Hong Kong, that's the legislative council in Hong Kong. So we would like to have a fair and equal and open election in Hong Kong. And since that, well, this kind of dream, it has been pursued for about 3 decades. So this is what, well, the youngster has been doing in Hong Kong. So it's, well, up till now, students in Hong Kong, youngsters in Hong Kong, they are still, well, kind of pursuing this kind of dream. But we could discuss it a little bit. This also, well, on the other hand, has some limitation on the participation of youngsters.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Let's give the word to Max.
Well, thank you. My view on this will be, my name is Max. I attend a high school in Denmark, in Copenhagen, called Rysensteen Gymnasium. And I think my view on this will be seen from...
Max, sorry. Because of the echo, try to speak slower so that the words can be understood. Okay. It echoes a lot.
Well, it will be from the view of a high school student, because I am that. So my starting point will be in my school. You know, I remember 1.5 years ago when I woke up in the library of my school one morning. It was my 17th birthday, and I had a birthday song and a birthday cake, and a lot of my friends and fellow students waking me up. And this was because we have some rehearsal and some student production on the school. But this is just to give you an example to understand that when I attend my school and when I walk the corridors of my school, it's a home-like feeling I get. You know, I'm comfortable there, and I definitely see a lot of my friends and fellow students having this same feeling of belonging to the place and participating in this place. So in my daily life at my school, I see this a lot, this participation in the democracy. Of course, it's on a small-scale basis when we talk a school as my own. But it's the spirit to, you know, between the students, I see the spirit to think critically and being independent in the choices people make. And not least having they know something about what's going on in the world and the problems that we face on a more global level, and that's very important as well. So I think this participation, even though it's in a smaller scale, this is my starting point, because this shows also a bit of how I want to paint the picture of the Danish school system as a whole, because it comes from the students and the way they create their own space and their own context, not involving the teachers always. And this is a life only for the students on my school. So it comes from the self-governing student councils and from the work they do. I work at my school myself. I have the key to my school. You know, that's a very huge responsibility the school gives me, but it's also a huge trust and a huge freedom for me. So, you know, I think this is where the democratic participation starts for me, especially for the young people, when you are shown respect and equal status to your teachers, and that you're shown that you belong to this place and you feel that you identify with the democracy you function in your daily life. This is very important. So what I'm mainly talking about here is that I feel that I have a lot of freedom through responsibility in my daily life. So of course, young people, if I should answer the question whether young people possess the power to enrich the democracy, of course I think so, because it just depends on how much the society relies on them. You know, if you get treated like a kid, you will probably see yourself as a kid and you will behave as a kid. So we need to give young people a chance, like myself and Alex and Filip and stuff. And we need to give them many chances to show themselves and the rest that we actually are able to manage the task to enrich democracy and help the democracy. And we cannot only give young people one chance. We need to give them many chances, because obviously you learn by doing and you learn by failing as well. You know, I live by myself, for example, and I do not say that I'm always extremely good at doing all these things that follows with having your own household, but I fail a lot as well. But I would definitely not learn to handle these things myself if I was sitting at home with my parents and just waiting for the maturity to come over me. You know, it's so you already kind of answered the question whether we possess this power by inviting us young people to participate in this debate. You know, I'm a normal Danish high school student, but still I get to participate here in this debate, and that's exactly what I mean with freedom under responsibility, because obviously I'm not as high educated or as experienced as a lot of other people on this conference, but I definitely wouldn't learn to become so if I didn't get the chance to participate in such a thing like this. So, you know, I'm actually surprised, even though I'm honored to be here as an 18-year-old student. I'm surprised that we are so few. You know, I'm 18 years, and I make the average age drop quite a bit in this conference. And that's actually a funny thing, because, you know, we're discussing democracy and we're discussing education, we're discussing issues that have huge impact on the future. So where are the rest young people than myself, Filip, and Alex? Where do they come into the picture? You know, it's when exactly what we need to make young people possess the power to actually enrich in this democracy is by letting them stand up and together, you know, try to make these results. So this will only be provided by actually relying on them, and this is what will make them willing to actually participate. So,
good. Now we have Max and Alex. X-Men. You have an X in both of your names. It's not a triple X-Men, but we have two X-Men. Now, do you feel that they hear you? Do you feel that they hear you? And do you feel that they, meaning the system, or let's say the adults, the big boys and the big girls, do you feel heard?
Well, this is a very complicated question, because, well, it always involves the dynamics. So if you only speak by yourself, usually, well, your words will not be heard, because, well, you are being systematically oppressed. So your voice would be, well, kind of soft, kind of transparent. It's like, well, even you speak, it's like your voice would not be heard. And that's why you need connection with one another, so that your voice could be heard in a concrete way.
Okay.
I
How
feel
about you live in a different situation from Alex.
I live in a very different situation because I believe that I'm heard a lot normally, you know. I'm in a system where it's very important to have equality between students and teachers, for example. I would call my teachers by their first name. Yesterday I had a talk with one of my teachers of my love life, you know. It's like you have this connection between students and teachers. It's not a very formal one, and this also is something that makes the education system of Denmark able to, you know, depend on other values than reading big books and memorize something in your head as the education, as the mainly part of the education. Instead, you know, more soft values and more, you know, a general human understanding, I think, is very much in focus in the Danish system. And this also makes the feeling that I get heard, because I am educated to be a person as a whole, and I'm educated to be a very democratically minded person in my system, and it's a lot in focus, so therefore I also happen to be heard instead of just having this teacher-student power relationship. So
there's an interesting comment from our Facebook users, whom I now virtually greet. There is actually a couple of voices, for example, Vít Pískovský. In my opinion, young people have the capacity to enrich democracy, but they do not know about these capacities and are lazy to try to understand why they should use them. And then there is another reaction from JANA TROJANOVÁ. Laziness and lack of interest is always a choice made by an individual. There is no system in the world, and there has never been, powerful enough to eliminate people's striving for education and for good. Now, Filip, do you feel heard?
Yeah, I feel, but I need to speak and need to try to be heard.
What do the young people actually care about? When I was your age, we did the transformation and communism and reforms and everything. That no longer is, in one way, thank goodness, that no longer is the topic. What are the topics that interest young people?
It's really broad spectrum of topics, and for me, it's, for example, education which is really important for us and which is close to us, and we should try to change current state of education. But in general, as Czech population, I think I cannot say one thing in which we are interested.
Do your classmates actually care? I mean, or what's the percentage of the people that are actually interested in, let's say, civil society, in politics, in international affairs?
It's really difficult to estimate, but I guess it can be 10%. It's really not high percentage. I'm afraid that I live in kind of bubble where I have friends who are interested and engaged, but outside this bubble, we can see ignorance and laziness to do something, to participate.
So you do tend to agree with the comment that one of the Facebook participants, Pískovský, had when he introduced the term laziness into the debate. Okay.
And the lack of education.
And lack of education.
Yeah, and I will talk about it later.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for the floor. The crucial role of students and student movements in history is undeniable. They often represented liberal wing of society, open-mindedness, political reforms, and so on. 17th November 39, Velvet Revolution, Arab Spring, or current situation in Hong Kong. In times of change, students are often the most influential proponents of political reforms. However, the young people, political participation stagnates, and young voters' turnout is below turnout average. Thus, we have to ask ourselves how to engage them to participate, even if their freedom is not restricted nowadays. My answer is education in the first place. Education, and especially liberal education, develops critical thinking, creativity, and argumentation skills. All of them are extremely important in a context of liberal democracy. They are a precondition to fully understand current complex society. They are necessary to everyone to become a good and active citizen. Liberal democracy cannot work alone. It needs people who understand how society works and do not hesitate to engage and change it, make it better for the future. Civil, pluralist, liberal and democratic society needs citizens able to think in these terms, people who wish to identify themselves with these principles. Nowadays, we can see how people in Europe easily move to the extremist worldviews, ideologies, as well as xenophobia. I suppose that the most powerful weapon against this phenomenon is education. States do not enough to educate their own citizens. They should definitely do more. Nevertheless, immediately emerges another question: how to educate about democracy and engage young people efficiently and effectively. And there should be a broad public discussion on this topic. Now, I would like to mention the role of young people in today's societies. Giving young people direct influence in decision-making process helps them to engage them in a positive relation with their communities. We can start at their schools and municipalities. But both of them should support young people to participate. We should let them change their environment and motivate them to do more. The reason is obvious. Without interest in their direct surroundings, civic engagement on the national or European level would be much more difficult. What I see as a problem is an underestimating and diminishing the role of young people. Saying that they are too young and too naive to discuss public and political issues instead of argumentation. We witnessed this phenomenon, for example, several years ago during the first student elections organized by the people in a NEET organization. Several Czech political parties tried to ban student model elections at schools, saying that they should be strictly apolitical, and I think this is wrong. In conclusion, I would like to say that young people have the power to enrich democracy, as well as democracy can enrich them. From my perspective, the key role in engaging young people is education, but not only formal education in schools. Especially in this field, non-formal and informal education are extremely important. The role of media and non-formal education projects should not be overlooked. And we can and should do more in civic education and engaging young people to participate. Education and liberal democracy are, in my opinion, strongly interconnected. Without citizens able to discuss and respect others, democracy cannot fully evolve. So that's for my opinion.
Thank you very much. And we have the last and the most distinguished panelist among us, Karel Schwarzenberg. The floor is yours.
Well, to be quite honest, I'm very honored to be invited on this panel, because with the greatest optimism, I can't say that I belong to the young generation. But maybe that's the advantage to make a contrast, because the picture is better if there are strong differences between black and white, or young and old. You see, I do think that we should avoid artificial division between young people and older people. There is much less difference than we think. I admit it's my personal experience. I had the luck already in my younger days to meet very important diplomats then and politicians. And I never thought even when I was, I don't know, 18, 20 or something like that, I'm less privileged than there. On the other side, I have now the enormous pleasure and honor too, that I have the chance to discuss with younger people. And I don't see the difference. But one great difference has developed in the last years or decades. One, in Europe at least, not of course in Eastern Asia or Asia or in South America. Whereas in the former generations, the young people were in the majority. Now in Europe, the young people become a minority because the old, as you see, getting too old instead of passing away in time, and there are less children, and the young people are now outright minority in comparison with the old people, which makes an enormous difference in society, produces social problems, which I would like to discuss now, but of course change the political situation too. In '68, the last European revolution we had, the students were leading. Now the students, I don't see them in any European country willing to start a revolution or even considering that it is their duty, because they become a minority. And if you go on the streets, you see one student and 5 gray-haired people running around. So that's an important difference. And of course, due to that, it's not so difficult now for young people to enter politics or whatever, have success, because on the other hand, all political parties, movements and whatever, are eager to get one of few young people available. Whereas in my younger days, it was often still shut up till you get older, then you are able to discuss. That has changed a lot. So far, so good. On the other hand, the world is changing much faster than an older generation. Admittedly, in the last 20 years, the world has changed in many aspects much more than in 100 years before. If I explain to my children, not to speak about my grandchildren, that 25 years ago the handy started, that the global intercommunication was just starting, but that when I was a student, we had still to ring the bell on the telephone, and then a kind voice from the post office with which number you would like to be connected, and after 5 years, and now you take a tablet and you can communicate with Hong Kong, Buenos Aires, or whomever in the world. The communication, the global internet has changed the world enormously. But we take, the young generation, of course, takes it as a natural thing, can't imagine it, and it is a very, very recent development. So the world has changed. When I was still engaged in human rights, the then dictators of the Soviet bloc could rely that the subjects won't get any information. And if they fight the radios like Free Europe or whatever, that somebody in Irkutsk or Dnipropetrovsk or something wouldn't get any information, and that was based their power. Now, in the remotest place in the world, you have in seconds information, whatever happens in the world. That changed the world enormously. You can't, in reality, we have, the world has changed in the last 20 years much more than sometimes in a time of 100 and 200 years. But the basic problems, and then the other thing, what people don't realize, still stay the same. And again in those days we see it, be it in Hong Kong, be it in some countries in Europe, each generation has to fight for liberty and for democracy. No generation is spared of it. And we thought, of course, after the year 89-90, when the mighty Soviet Empire imploded, when dozens of dictatorships disappeared, as Fukuyama said, now the blessed time of democracy, freedom, and liberal order is no. Of course, that was a nonsense, because the human being didn't change. We changed the world. The surrounding world has changed. But we stayed the same, meat-eating apes we were 10 or 100,000 before. We are still the same greedy people. We are still power. We enjoy exercising power. We enjoy, from time to time, to kill each other. We didn't change so much. So, of course, each generation has to fight this. We have to fight for democracy, for the rule of law, which is the most important thing, and for liberty. And only the devil or the danger appears sometimes from the unexpected side. The politicians, generals, tend to fight the battle of the past, to fight the danger where we experience it as a young people or something. But the danger suddenly comes out from a totally different angle, and we need some time to learn it. The only thing is that, of course, at least in Europe, and up to a certain degree in States too, we have a generation which grew up in unimaginable security and wealth and luxury. Never a generation for experience. Let's give one example. 100 years ago, it's not so far again, only the richest people could allow to travel. And it was a question of a millionaire to go to Egypt for leave or to go to India then. Now, we are traveling through the whole world, backpacking, and meet normal students who saw more of the world than I in my whole life, because they took their backpack and just started to get off, which was then impossible. So, in Europe, this generation had all the possibilities, had half a century of peace, everything which is incredible, and in other parts of the world is accepted. So this generation, sorry to say, which is going now up, will face a world which won't be neither as safe as it was till now, neither democracy, freedom, and the rule of law will be a natural thing, but they will detect that they will have to defend it as their grandfathers did or great-grandfathers. So we have a very different world, but we don't get nervous. After all, our fathers and grandfathers mastered and did their job fighting Hitler, fighting Stalin, fighting in East Asia, the Japanese militarism. They survived and built a better world. We have new dangers, we will survive too, but we have to face, and we must be sure that we will fight as the former generation did, in another form, but still that. So I think the problems, the world has changed, but the problem stayed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So democracy and freedom is not an automatic state of mankind. It seems that if you let go of the steering wheel, democracy and freedom is not where the car will go automatically. It seems from hearing you that there needs to be some effort in maintaining the best system that we have, which we call democracy, but it is also not a natural system. It's something that we've created and we need to nurture and care. Now, also the world seems to be a much more disturbed place in 2015 than it was in 2005. In 2005, at least in my opinion, the world looked rosy and peaceful, and Europe was spreading, and the amount of conflict seemed to go down. That opinion I find no longer current. The world seems to be disturbed. There are evil forces on the rise. How do you, young ones that have certain advantages on the internet, on thinking in a new way, but also certain disadvantages in not being experienced enough, how do you connect? Do you actually connect between yourselves? Do you actually, for example, you, Alex, do you seek for support and help and pressure from other similar student organizations outside of Hong Kong?
Yes, I do. It's like connection is important. It's like I agree that democracy is not something natural. That is something that we have to protect. There's also a problem for Hong Kong. This explains why I have to tell the story of what happened in Hong Kong up to from 80s up to now. So from 80s up to now, well, the democracy that people is pursuing, that is liberal democracy. But it has some problems in the political, in the party politics and also the social movement. It's like liberal democracy is stressed a lot on representative. So representative has to take up a quite important role in mobilizing party politics and even social movement. Then it comes a problem. People in Hong Kong, they could be highly mobilized in social movement, but they have little connection. They have little connection in Hong Kong. So even though internet nowadays, it is widely spread, and we could use internet as a tactic to mobilize people to go on street. But point still, people do not have a healthy and strong conversation and dialogue through internet. It is still not what's happening in Hong Kong, but rather, internet is kind of like a battlefield. It's like a lot of false news will be spread through internet. And there's a lot of messy things happening in internet. So it's kind of two ways. It's like on the one way, if the traditional culture, the political culture in the city is kind of too representative, too elitism, too representative democracy, then on the internet, it is kind of a representation of the political culture, but not to well counter this phenomenon. But of course, internet, it could be used as a tool to try as hard as you can, but it still comes a problem. If liberal democracy is not simply the sole solution for the world or for people to rebuild the connection of one another. So how could we fix democracy? Or what kind of democracy would be healthier for a community to neutral? So we could have a more healthy society, healthy community that we could really initiate connection and dialogues.
Philip?
Yeah,
Max.
I can definitely agree that we have to protect democracy, and I suppose that the worst threat to democracy is lack of education about democracy and about society. As you asked before, where we meet, we as active people, I think that extremely important role is non-formal educational projects. Projects like, for example, in Czech Republic, Prague Student Summit, or some unions, organizations, generally civic society, which connects us and which only provides us a space when we can discuss and meet other people from various parts of our country and also from various parts from Europe to discuss these problems and to try make society better and to educate others in terms of democracy and liberal principles.
It seems that we have given two things to the world, democracy and liberal capitalism, or capitalism. Looking at the map of the world, it seems that we've been quite successful in exporting capitalism. We've not been so successful in exporting democracy. Looking at the Arabic Spring, looking at the development in China, looking at other places of the world, It seems that capitalism, yes, democracy, no. Even though you can have educated countries such as China not being so enthusiastic about democracy. And please explain, Alex, perhaps I can ask you, why is it that in the mainland China there are not, at least to my knowledge, not similar upheavals like in Hong Kong? Is it because of the little bit of freedom that you enjoyed during the recent 100 years?
It's like the room we have in Hong Kong is, well, much larger than the one in China. So people in China, no matter students, activists, or scholars in university, they would face a more severe oppression from the government. So the control and different kind of, different sort of oppressive tools in China, well, is more common. So people in China, it's quite hard to resist. It's like even for labor unions, it's kind of hard for them to connect one another. If your movement, well, there's a quite significant people or figure that could be recognized, then they will be oppressed in a very severe way. So it's slightly different from Hong Kong. So the circumstances, well, the room you have is a bit different, and it also neutral different kind of social movement in Hong Kong and China.
But do you get any feedback? Do you get any reaction in the mainland?
It's like we do have some alliance from mainland China, but even this is the case, but they would not, well, come to be a very strong voice because it is very scattered in different places in China. And the control of press, the control of information in China is still, well, relatively strong. So although people could really, well, try to use some software so as to make a breakthrough from the control, but those information spread by the Chinese government or even the ideology in China, it still has an upper hand over the people.
Okay. So it's also quite interesting because the Occupy movement, that was mainly critical against capitalism, or against our form of capitalism, that became quite a widespread global phenomenon. Democratic movements have not. I mean, unless you take the Arabic bloc, that sort of spread. But otherwise, I don't see, I think the Occupy movement was much more internationally connected, my feeling is, than the pro-democratic ones.
Well, I ask myself for another thing. We are all human beings, and human beings are susceptible to fashions. As long as it's the length of the skirt, or narrower or wider jeans, it's okay. But evidently the same is in politics. And I ask myself if democracy is, in the younger generation, partly out of fashion. Just simply out of fashion. And on the other hand, when I was at the university, which is some time ago, before the 68th revolution, we wanted to change the world. We didn't wish to have what we call la politique de papa, the authoritarian world of the generation of our fathers and grandfathers, and we wanted to have a real open democracy discussing all kinds of things. But of course, that's meantime a long time ago, and if I see some movements and some slogans, which are quite successful today, evidently in the wide part of Europe, not in Hong Kong, where you're lacking democracy, and the democracy you like only love if you don't have it. If you have it, you see, it's boring to many citizens. That's the difference between Hong Kong and Europe. And I would like to know ask you if in Denmark or in the Czech Republic, the democratic ideas isn't considered boring. It is the ideas of the fathers, and we have to start a new, different world of politics. That's what I'm asking myself.
That's a great question. The last forum was about democracy, and I remember one of the slogans of that was a writing on the wall. I miss how much I was loved 20 years ago, democracy. And that sort of almost brought tears to my eyes, because it's true. We really used to love her a lot. We used to be able to go to the streets, even to lay our lives. we don't care about her anymore? What has democracy gone out of fashion?
I think that in Denmark, it is often like this, that because Denmark is a small country, it's a very secure little country with few problems, far away from war and distress and stuff like this. So I think many people forget the democracy. They forget the importance of the democracy maybe sometimes, and this can of course create some kind of passiveness. But this is where I think it's, as we talked about before, the way we communicate with each other, that we actually understand as Danish young people that we need to participate on a more global scale, and we need to focus on global problems because they will end up being our problems as well, even though they are quite far away at the moment. So I think maybe it has become more of an image thing in Denmark sometimes to participate in the democracy, but we just need, through, for example, we have a program on my school, a global citizenship program, where we have partner schools all over the world, and we exchange ideas. We try to get to a more cultural understanding of each other, and I think this is maybe the right way to actually create a more global democracy, because we cannot spread the democracy by forcing the democracy to be spread, but more to understand each other and maybe understand the different ways we see the democracy. So I think the way is to spread it out to a more global view for example, the Danish people, to make sure that they not think that the democracy is a boring thing, because it's not, and it has to be protected, but just not only in Denmark, because it's too far away from the problem. So there is not enough to fight for if we only see inside the borders of Denmark.
Which one of you watches the Game of Thrones? So it's actually quite a prophetic series, because Denmark is far away from the wall. And the wall is being breached. I'm quite looking forward to see the 6th episode, because I think they have become unwillingly extremely timing with the refugee crisis breaching the wall. And there are walls built in Europe, in the middle of it. We almost forgot about these border things. How do Czech students react to the problems behind the wall? Because we're actually quite secure. This Fortress Europe is a term that we've used for many years. Do you have resistance from the other students, or is it just passivity? And what is the resistance that you actually meet? Do you actually have student groups at your age level saying, no, we actually like this ideology more than this democratic nonsense, because look at Europe? Point number one. Question number two, talking about series, there is a Game of Thrones, Game of Cards, House of Cards, right? Confusing names. I have learned at a debate at an American embassy, one of the diplomats said that this is the most followed series in Russia. And I was wondering how it must be to look at our own description of democracy, because the House of Cards is a very cynical critique of democracy in one way. We all take it with a pinch of salt, because we understand that it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek self-joke, but when somebody from China or from Russia, used to the more authoritarian leaders who will never allow series like this to be made, wouldn't their impression of Western-type democracy be, if this is what democracy is about, we don't want it? What about the voice of the people? It's all games and tricks and tactics and bribes and violence and threats. That's how you run democracy? That's what you want to introduce to the world? So maybe we shouldn't forget about this part of the ideological component that we Europeans or Westerners, Americans, are making as a glitch image of ourselves. But again, back to the resistance. Do you have anti-groups of students, or is it just passivity and neglect? And if so, where are the resistance points that you hear, that you encounter? Can I start with you?
Yeah, I suppose that it's more passivity, that active students who wish to discuss these problems are more liberal than the whole society, which is in the Czech Republic really conservative in terms of, for example, immigration crisis and so on. But we have some exceptions, but in general, I suppose that low percentage of students who wish to discuss are open-minded in these topics. The problem is that we have no public discussion, and especially among students, we have no discussion about, for example, immigration crisis and current public affairs. In schools, we have just a few hours of civic education. There is no time for discussion about current topics, and then students are just under the influence of their parents, under the influence of media, and it's not, especially nowadays, the best place where they should learn about topics like immigration and so on.
Good.
Okay. Hong Kong's case is that we have...
Sorry, prepare questions. We will have your time now.
Okay. Hong Kong's case is that we will have a student organization called Federation of Students. So it was composed of 8 students' union. So people would go for the election for student union, and they would then get into federation. They would have a meeting on a weekly basis. So we would discuss issues happen and would initiate action or campaign on different issues. But this also comes a point is that although we have this kind of form of liberal democracy in student union or even for the political parties. But people in Hong Kong, they are still not that active. They would be mobilized. But if there's nothing big happen, people will just stay on their individual field.
How is it possible that people of Hong Kong, people used to being actually voicing their opinion quite frequently for 100 years, they've had a system that's much more closer to the Western side than to the Chinese side. How come that they are so numb also?
How come they're so numb? Well, then it's about the colonial tactics of the British government before 1997. The colonial government, they will have a lot of policy on how to depoliticize people, like distract their attention from politics. It seems like that the government will like describe themselves as kind of benevolent and
what?
benevolent. It's like they're very kind. The government of kindness. It's like they will also adopt a policy like laissez-faire. So the development of Hong Kong or the importance of Hong Kong, how it would turn to be, is all rests on the effort of individual. So the point for the life goal of individual is to really work hard on the economic aspect. So this is kind of the trick that they're playing with people. So in this sense, people will be, well, depoliticized, or they will be just being kept away from politics or public sphere.
So what are you saying is that the numbness of the population, if I may say such a strong word, has already been practiced by the British colonial, and the Chinese are continuing, perhaps learning from that?
It's kind of internalized. So what matters to Hong Kong is the competition, is matter of competition, matter of the accumulation of wealth. It's kind of a very capitalist idea. So it's like Hong Kong is a very cricket city. Well, it adopts a very ideological pattern of capitalism. But on the other hand, it seems that this part didn't really strengthen the voice for democracy, but rather it turns people to be quite inactive.
How would you name such a system? I always have trouble giving a label to, let's say, the system in Hong Kong, because it seems that there's a combination of extreme libertarian capitalism in certain places, combined with quasi-totalitarian politics.
Yeah, this is also a question that we have to articulate. It seems that, so here's the question, is capitalism, or the current form of capitalism, is this really saving democracy, or strengthening democracy, or killing democracy in some hand? I think Hong Kong is a very good example to really have the study work out to fix the current form of capitalism, and to rethink how would democracy be survived in such kind of form.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Max? What are you fighting against? Is it against laziness and apathy, or do you actually have active anti-protesters against you?
Against you, sorry. If we have
with the rest of the students, do you actually have groups who say, no, what you're trying to do is nonsense, we should do something else? Or is it just laziness and passivity?
I think that we have a lot of faith in the system, actually. And I think, you know, as I said before, in Denmark, we have a system that educates us to think critically. But, you know, we have faith in the system, but still I think that people all the time wants to improve the democracy, but it's not because they want to stand up against the democracy as an ideology. So what I think is...
But how about nationalism? This is something that sometimes has a tendency to be on the rise in Denmark.
Yeah, I think what we try to do is to illuminate the nationalism in Denmark, because of course we should be proud of being Danes, but we should understand that maybe the world's biggest problems are not in Denmark. So I think we need to spread out and, as said, see it in a more global view, and that's also why we try to, through educating more global citizens, we try to get this cultural understanding that actually will make people, you know, more capable in this situation, instead of being lazy, than actually taking part in the world, and not only in Denmark as nationalists, but seeing it in a more global view. So, yeah.
Good. We have a first question. Where did the microphone go again? Please, if you...
Tomáš, abych měl jednu otázku ještě.
Okay. Well, let's first start here, and then go to Paul. But before that, Karel Schwarzenberg has a question. So hold your horses for a second. Yes.
One question. In the last 50 years, and I was witnessing it, all taboos in our society disappeared. When I was growing up and still a student, there were a lot of sexual taboos, religious taboos, political taboos, and so on. Nowadays, all these taboos have disappeared, at least in my feeling. If I today would be outing myself that my partner is a carp in the pond, people would be only mildly interested. It would be nobody would be shocked. And you can offend in any way, be it the Pope, be the Queen, or Jesus Christ, Buddha, Muhammad. All taboos disappeared, which existed still when I was there. Now I have two questions. Do you feel that in modern society, for you, there are existing some taboos? Are there new taboos or not? And or do you feel it natural that there is no taboo at all, which was for 10,000 years a natural thing in human history? That's a question where I ask myself. The absence of taboo. But maybe you feel some new taboos. I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't hear all of the questions.
Do you think that the taboos are becoming extinct? Or do you feel that there are still certain areas that are taboo that you are not allowed to talk about?
Well, if I should say that there is a taboo in Denmark, it is to maybe question the liberal democracy, actually. So that could in some ways be seen as a taboo, but if you accept this ideology and this system, nothing else would be seen as a taboo in Denmark, I think. So of course you can see that as a problem if you think that another system than the liberal democracy would be better, and you want to challenge this ideology. But apart from that, I don't see any taboos that would not be able to be seen in a critical mind and in the Danish system. No.
Okay. What about you?
I personally think that liberal democracy in Czech environment it's not attacked from some ideological groups which are relevant. But my experience from Europe, from contact with representative of other student unions is that many of them just don't agree with the concept of liberal democracy. I was a bit shocked, but when I, as a representative of Czech High School Students' Union, proposed amendment that we as an organization should defend liberal democracy, most of representatives of European student schools unions disagreed with this idea. So I think that in our country and in my social circles, I don't know much people who disagree with the concept of liberal democracy. But I'm afraid that in current Europe, it's under attack of other extremist ideologies and other concepts.
Of course, the most dangerous taboos are the ones that are not only not talked about, but they're also invisible. Can't put a name on it, can't put a label. Now, of course, in your case, I suppose this is a much bigger list of taboos, no?
Yeah, the taboo would be the common sense, I would say. Well, the taboo would be really the common sense.
The problem with common sense is that it's not so common.
Yeah, it's like things that we take as truth, but we rarely challenge it. Or the definition of those common sense is that being distorted or being, well, described in a way that it is, well, smartly crafted. It's like democracy or liberal democracy or capitalism. It is really a question in Hong Kong. It's like, in Hong Kong's case, just like what I've mentioned, is the current form of capitalism really, well, saving democracy or killing democracy? Because it seems that the capitalism in Hong Kong is teaching Hong Kong people that the form of democracy is simply about election, but nothing more. So the democratic movement in Hong Kong is also very heavily about liberal democracy, but not a radicalized form of democracy. If democracy is about participation, mutual trust, mutual responsibility, it's simply those democracy about election could bear this kind of responsibility. Well, I doubt. So, but in Hong Kong's case, it's like, well, capitalism is still taken as common sense. Liberal democracy is still being taken as common sense, as the only way out for Hong Kong's current situation. So this would be something as taboos, but people would not, rethink it, in daily basis. But this is really a problem. This is actually a taboo.
We have a question. Just briefly introduce yourself, and then if after you lay the question, let the microphone go to Paul.
Šimon Fiala, dobrý den. I have a question for Filip. Filip, you identified the opportunities for youth engagement in democracy with student conferences and education. And I'm thinking, don't you think that this is really the co-opted youth that exchanges their genuine opinion for the opportunity to shine on a stage and wear an impeccable suit? Are you really that skeptical towards underground movements or street-level social protest?
Thank you.
I agree that I was a bit elitist in what I said. I definitely agree that we have other environments where young people can participate, where they can meet and discuss various topics. It was my experience from that project, but I definitely agree that we have other environments which I rather don't know, but I believe that they are, and I would be glad if you or someone else would describe us how they work and whether they are in our country.
So you have a perfect opportunity for a Facebook session. Please, Paul.
Hello, I'm Paul Flather. I call myself an engaged citizen. I'm sorry I'm a bit old, but I was young once, and like Tomáš, I think we both think that we're still young.
Yes,
so forgive me. I wanted to make a point about power. I think one of the problems is that in the world that we now live in, power is very diffuse, and we don't really know who we are supposed to protest against and argue against. There's only one definition for me about democracy, and that is, can we throw the rascals out? Okay? Can we replace our leaders that we perhaps don't like? And it's pretty difficult to do that. If it's in Prague, it may be possible, but if it's in Brussels, or if the rascal is in Wall Street, or in Frankfurt, or in London, or in Moscow, it's pretty difficult. So I think one of the problems that younger folk, and this is where I agree very much with what Max is saying and Alex, it's about connections and about seeing a bigger picture, and actually perhaps trying to get and it's not easy, a new understanding of what democracy today is about. I think one of the successes of the Hong Kong protest movement is you knew who your opponent was, in some sense. You could associate that. And I was in New York and walked past the Occupy banners several times because I was in a conference which took me past. And they could see, if you like, their opponents because they walked through into the tall buildings. But for many of us, it's quite hard to see who we're protesting against. So we've got to be able to throw the rascals out, but who the hell are the rascals?
Yes. Alex, Max, perhaps you want to react?
I didn't understand it, so I can't.
Who are the enemies? What's the opposition? Who are we, in your case, you, fighting against? In case of Alex, it's a little bit more easier to see because the regime is totalitarian, while in liberal democracies, the enemy is very often invisible or liquid or shifting. Or we'll take it as a comment, or do you want to react?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, power is a very important comment on the current situation, on how to analyze who we should oppose to. Because on the one hand, it seems that very obvious that enemy are the one on the top, they are the one who is ruling the society. But on the other hand, it seems that we ourselves are also something that we have to counter about because we also assist the current system in operating in this way. So it seems that it is two-way that we have to counter both.
Yes, the specialization of labor we can divide up to the last penny, but the specialization of responsibility we cannot. Next question, please.
My name is Matya Shorshi. I reject to apologize for my age. I'm a Hungarian. And in Hungary, there are problems with democracy, of course, cannot be compared with Hong Kong. But those who are critical about the current government and they say it is not democratic, it doesn't seem that it can make the society excited. And this leads me to the question whether discussions about democracy is a good discussion or not, because it presents that democracy is an end, is an objective, and not a tool to achieve something. So I'm wondering whether the discussion would be changed, not about democracy, but about what you can achieve with democracy, whether it would be more useful to make young people more active. The second question is just following up what Karel Schwarzenberg said about this totally different life, what we are living in. And the question is, how does this fully new life influences the participation of youth in international matters? We know that the Arab Spring, by and large, used Facebook to make this in Tunis and other countries. Why Danish students or Czech students cannot be more active in Hong Kong matters? Whether there are relationships between the Hong Kong freedom fighters and those youngsters who did the Maidan in Ukraine. Does this new world create a new possibility for you, and how do you utilize this?
Thank you, and we are nearing the end. Our time is running out, so I'll ask for brevity. So is freedom and democracy, is that the end station? Is that a goal, or is that a tool? Is freedom the beginning, or is freedom the end? This is something that Václav Havel and philosophers talk about, the difference between freedom from totalitarianism and freedom to. Is perhaps freedom as a platform to do good things, which is interesting. Here in Europe, you hear all the time, we have to help the refugees. We don't want to, we have to. This was also an interesting semantic difference there. Please.
Yeah, to me, it would be compatible. It's like it's a tool to be free from fears. It's like free from the it's like the dictatorship. But it's, on the other hand, it's not only about system. It's also about culture or the practice, the everyday life that you are involved to engage in. So democracy is on the one hand that you have to shape the system in a political, democratic way. But on the other hand, you can't only talk about election. It's also about how the society is operated. But my point is, or my question is, democracy does not stand alone herself. Democracy, well, it works with other systems, the economic system, the social system. So it's like when we talk about democracy, we cannot ignore other parts because they are interacting or influencing one another. If we simply focus too much on democracy but ignore the current economic system, say the crisis since 2008, then we are simply being ignorant again. We are simply, putting so much false hope on democracy. It's like democracy, well, it is a very ideal way for humans to practice or to communicate in a fair way, in a respectful way. But we could not simply focus on democracy. We also have to fix democracy with the help of the current economic system. And we have to fix both ways so that we could have a sustainable world, but not a world that is being bankrupting.
Very well said. I will take those as final words, unless you want to say something. Yes?
Yeah, I wanted only to answer that question. I definitely think that democracy is a tool, but we need to bear in mind distinction between democracy and Farid Zakaria's constitutional liberalism. And I think that we should educate about both, about democracy as a tool, how to create government, and constitutional liberalism, like principles and values which are strongly interconnected with democracy and which guarantee individual freedoms and which are just necessary for fulfillment of all democratic principles.
As a moderator, we are always asked to sum up 1.5 hour long debate into 3 main points, which is of course impossible, but that's why we are here. Would it be fair if I summed it up in saying that the biggest enemy or obstacle or hindrance that you as young ones face is laziness, passivity, ignorance and lack of education? Second point would be that it's actually quite interesting that even in the world of connections, these groups don't seem to be all that well connected. I mean, the refugees seem to be more coordinated than you guys. Just to, put a little poke there. And the third point is that we need to protect systems such as democracy, and I even think we need to protect systems such as culture. If democracy loses culture, it will go down the way of some of these countries in the past. This has happened, that a fully democratic country turns less and less so. But perhaps the same is true of capitalism. If capitalism lacks the culture of capitalism, then it will become a vicious system. Would these 3 points be a fair way of summing it up? Thank you very much for your agreement, and I am looking forward for hearing you next time. Thank you.